So we start with Nina on behalf of the center and everybody in the group. We'll all make an offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings, and then the second prayer requesting to turn the wheel, and then we can do our little motivation, which I shall lead. Okay.
Yes, and everybody, if you know the tune, just feel free to join me as well.
Imagine if we don't know the Buddhist cosmology, just imagine you're thinking of all the marvelous things of the world, just piling them all up and then making an offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. That's the meaning.
Saji Puki Jukshin Metok Tramri Rablingji Nidekyen Padi Sangye Jindu Mikte Ulwa Idro Kunamdak Jingla Chepalshok. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billowing clouds of the wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami.
All right. So now we just state our purpose in our mind. This is really, the Lamas call it setting our motivation. We'd say stating our purpose. Why are we here together? Well, we're here to listen to these teachings, and that's including me, I promise, about the meaning of life. You know, what is the mind? What is it? What's happiness? What's suffering? How to get rid of suffering? How to get happiness? How to help others? This is really what Buddhism is. It's a worldview. So we're listening to this worldview so we can take some tools from it, some advice from it, to help us develop our marvelous potential so we can help others, which is the essence of it. Yeah, that's it, all the way to Buddhahood. And the first two lines are just reminding us of our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings for those of us who already feel like we've committed to being Buddhists. Sangye charang soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangye drupashok sangye charang soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangye drupashok. So we're saying, you know, we rely upon until we're enlightened, we're going to rely upon the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. And by the virtuous karmic seeds we plant in our minds from listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha so we can be of benefit to all sentient beings. Okie doke. So here we are discussing this worldview, basically. It's a way of putting it. It's a worldview. And I like giving the biggest context possible, you know. The biggest context possible is that we're all these human beings on the planet. We've been humans for a few thousand years, probably. I don't know how long. We never quite agree on that, I suppose. But we, you know, and see, as long as we've got these intelligent minds, we've been coming up with, basically, think about it. We've been doing some observation of reality. We've been seeing things that exist, and we've been presenting our findings, all kinds of viewpoints. You've got the Australian Aboriginals. I mean, they've got a viewpoint about the world. I tell you, it's so abstract. It existed in isolation for many, I mean, they'd say 50,000 years, you know. They've got this extraordinary view. When I hear it, I can't even comprehend it. So we've got these humans, and they come up with viewpoints. We all think. We've got intelligence, so we think. Then you got all the viewpoints well before Judaism came along. You got the viewpoints before that, the Indians, you know, probably 5,000 years. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, with these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago, they were the ones who were thinking about the nature of self. Buddha comes along 2,500 years ago, and then 2,000 years ago you've got Jesus. Then endlessly, and they've got, you know, what's his name, in all these different viewpoints all over the world. You've got humans presenting their views about reality. So broadly speaking, they're all got equal status insofar as that is concerned, isn't it? They're humans coming up with views about the universe. Well done. And who are any of us to be so arrogant and to sit there without any kind of investigation, to chuck out some and to agree with others? That's just ignorance, you know, and that's what we tend to do. If you're brought up in a Christian view, you assume Christianity is right and you don't question, and everybody else is stupid. If you're brought up as a materialist, which is the prevailing view in the world now, you think everybody else is stupid, you know. You're brought up as a Muslim, everyone, I mean, that's how we can be. So we've got to open our minds, right? We've got to open our minds. So here we are, you know, us white people, Christians, let's say, some of us are white, some are not, but those of us got European background, you know, we've been completely imbued with, our minds have been imbued with all those views. Tracking back mostly to the Greeks. What do we know about China? What do we know about India? Zero. What do we know about Australian Aboriginals? Less than zero, you know. So it seems to me, you know, it's marvelous. Human beings are so marvelous, so wonderful. They're crazy minds coming up with all sorts of wonderful views about how things exist. Now, what's interesting is, as we know, the prevailing view, and this is probably what tracks itself back to Galileo and that lot when they started arguing with the Catholics, practically burned at the stake for doing so. They started coming up with this thing about, if you know, that if you had to verify something for it to be valid. Well, that sounds a pretty intelligent idea. That sounds pretty reasonable. And so you would say certainly that over the centuries, coming from Galileo, coming down, now we've got basically the philosophical materialists. But this view of what can be observed, therefore it's valid, is still fine. But and this is exactly what Buddha is saying. Maybe as a Christian, you would never say you can prove that God is true, because if you can, then you must also be God. So it's interesting. There's different views. But the Buddhist one is really crucial to understand. It's exactly the same as Einstein and all those fellows, those scientists, Mr. Galileo, you know, has to be observed by the mind, or whatever they say. Well, Buddha agrees. But the radical point here we have to factor in, the radically different point here we have to factor in is what the mind is that does the observing. That's the difference, you know. Buddha agrees. He says that which exists is that which can be cognized by mind. That's axiomatic for Buddhism. That which exists is that which can be cognized by mind. That's a shock to the Christians. It's a shock to the Muslims because they put God there. And the materialists would agree with that, perfect, but then you got to posit what's the mind. And that's the difference. Buddha asserts, as we know, Buddha coming from these Indians, he asserts a level of consciousness when today we're going to get into this one. I'm leaping ahead of myself. This is what we're going to get into. We haven't discussed the mind yet. You know, we've first started with the concept of the mind, at least, which is useful for us modern people to think, just to hear generally what the mind is at the very beginning and how it's beginningless and how it's got this marvelous potential. That's what we began with. Not much detail. Then we thought, when we started thinking about the precious of this human life, and Atisha and Tsongkhapa's agenda there is to give us a wake-up call, not to waste this precious life. Then we enter into the path, junior school, entry level, you know, the very beginning, and then Atisha gets us to increase our wake-up call to think by thinking about it, this vast body of Buddha's observation about the nature of reality being impermanence. But he gets us right between the eyeballs to think about gross impermanence, not subtle impermanence. That's fascinating teaching. Subtle impermanence is there's vast teachings on that, and you can actually confuse it with emptiness. It's so subtle. But our teacher's not worried about that here. Tsongkhapa too. They want us to increase our wake-up call, not to waste this precious life, because we could die at any moment. And then we next increase our wake-up call even more, get an increased sense of urgency, the type of rebirths. There's no, you know, type of rebirths. And as we hear here, we start to understand Buddha asserts a whole bunch of other mind streams, because a sentient being is a mind possessor. So if you have the materialist view, the only ones you talk about a mind maybe are those humans and animals, and I'm not sure about the little bugs, and we can't see anything else. Buddha's got a vaster view, which assumes this subtler mind that can cognize phenomena that the gross mind can't. But we don't go into detail yet. So the main point at this point is not to have a future suffering rebirth. Thank you very much. Then the next point is, well, whom can I turn to? Where's the doctor that can give me methods to prevent that type of suffering, future suffering, suffering of suffering? Then we take refuge, and then we start to put our money where our mouth is, which is where we've been the last couple of weeks, going into this natural law of karma. So where does this come from? Always I quote that scientist in New Zealand who asked me, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? Always I quote that. And he's shocked when I said, well, would you ask Einstein who revealed relativity to him? We would laugh at that because we assume that science means something you can observe with your intelligence. Well, Buddha agrees. But the difference is the level of mind that we've got that can observe. That's what we have to posit here as the possibility. So Buddha, even here, he mainly gets us in this point before we start to think about karma. He gets us to think about the suffering of the lower realms. Of course, that's anathema for us in our modern culture. We have a panic attack when we hear it. It sounds like the most hysterical, superstitious idea we've ever heard. A scientist would laugh at you and feel really sorry for you if you thought that you can turn into a worm or a worm can turn into a human. It's like laughable, because of course it doesn't fit in the materialist mind. Of course it doesn't. It doesn't fit in that model, you know. So now so then we start to abide by the laws of karma. This natural law, Buddha says, that runs the universe, the law within which the universe runs. No one runs it. It's not punishment, not reward. And that's the crucial point to hear. Because when we hear karma, we get guilt, which is self-blame, or other blame. But there's no such concept. It's dualistic nonsense for the Buddha. There's no punisher. There's no rewarder. There's no boss running the show. This is a shocking idea to us, you know. Having a boss running the show is like conspiracy theories. And look at all the crazy minds now these days, all these conspiracy theories, you know. It's just demented mind. It's craziness. Buddha says there's a natural law that runs the universe. It's a shocking view, and it actually implies emptiness. It's a pretty astonishing view. So now, given that this is the first stage of practice, the main agenda up to this point is now to start to want to control our body and speech, to control the servants of our mind, because we do not want future suffering. Not to mention we don't want suffering right now. Now we go on, we discuss that, the law of karma, how it works, and how to purify. And if we had that level of practice, we can die happily, with confidence, that we'll get at least another decent human rebirth so we can keep on moving on our spiritual path. That's all the logic of the first stages of practice. Now we can move to the second level, because that's not enough. We want to go more. We want to get the hell out of suffering altogether. So now we go to the deeper, the next level, the more advanced level, the middle scope, high school, I call it high school. Now we get to the root of the problem and the root of our liberation, the mind. This is where we study Buddha's model of the mind. You know, several years you study it in the monasteries. And we're studying some of the philosophical courses that come around in some of the centers now, like some of the FPMT centers, certainly, and other centers as well, many of them, not just Gelugpas. You know, you study this text called Lorig, Mind and Awareness. And you study in depth the epistemological model of the mind and the psychological model. It's totally, totally fascinating. So fascinating. And it's directly coming from these Indians well before the Buddha. Excuse me. But here, the framework for our path here is really, we can go into the Four Noble Truths now. That's a framework for another way of, it's one way of presenting all of Buddha's teachings. But here we can go into the Four Noble Truths. So, but in another way, as I've been saying, it's a more subtle level of practice. The general character of the first stages of practice, especially at the point where you start to abide by the laws of karma. Up to then, all those points are priming our mind, getting us ready to want to actually practice. Where you actually start to practice, where you abide by the laws of karma. And that's all about body and speech. Not much discussion about mind here. The body and speech, the servants of the mind. We have to harness them. Why? Because the implication is they're driven by the crazy delusions. The delusions are not taught there, but now we get to the point where we deal with the delusions themselves. We deal with the mind. Because that's the boss. So this is where we really become Buddhists. The first stages of practice, abiding by the laws of karma, is another way of putting that is live a good ethical life. Don't kill, don't steal, don't harm, don't jump on the wrong partner, don't badmouth. I mean, a good communist would do that, a good Christian, a good Muslim, a good Australian Aboriginal, a good anybody. That's accepted among all good humans on this in this universe, good ethics. That's nothing special. Buddha's view of it maybe is pretty unique. Never mind. Now we get to the very precise, specific approach of the Buddha, which is to do with the mind. Buddha's, his expertise is the mind. Everything in Buddhism is about the mind. Everything comes down to the mind. All suffering comes from the mind. Happiness comes from the mind. This is a very shocking and weird idea. It does not fit with the materialist view at all. And it's not the way Christians talk or Muslims talk. Absolutely not. It's about the mind. As far as the Buddha is concerned, the mind runs the universe. The mind is the creator of all reality. The mind is what creates karma. Karma is self-creation, as His Holiness says. Mind is beginningless. Mind is endless. It's not physical. It's a chain of mental moments. It's a river of mental moments. It's a chain of this unbroken kind of series of links of moments that go back beginninglessly, necessarily, because you can't have a first cause. That's a big extent. There's big, deep teachings in the Christian teachings, they tell me, trying to validate how there can be a first cause. It's okay, it's fine, nothing wrong. Buddha just says you can't be such a thing. It's a contradiction in terms. But as mad as it sounds, which is instinctively shocking to us, is that mind has to be beginningless, therefore. Matter as well. A Big Bang, His Holiness said one time, I'm paraphrasing in all his discussions with scientists, Big Bang, no problem, he said, but just not the first Big Bang, that's all. This is a very shocking concept for us. Why? Because we instinctively, primordially, utterly believe, but there has to be a first moment. Check your mind. Check how silly it sounds that there can't be a first moment. But what's the first moment? We always ask that. Where did it begin? We ask that. Where did it begin? Where did the universe begin? We're looking for the first Big Bang. Where did the world begin? And so if you're a Christian, it begins with God. Muslim the same, goes back to God, and God is the cause. But of course, if you're a smarty pants kid at school, you say, please miss, who created God? And that's not a good question, is it? You're not supposed to ask that question. Buddha doesn't have a view like that. He would say philosophically, that's the view of ego grasping. That's the view of ignorance. That's the view of marimpa. That's the view of self-existence. That's the view that says there is a concrete, solid, inherent, permanent, unchanging, inherent, intrinsic thingness, creator, good, bad, and everything. That's the fundamental view that Buddha argues with implicitly in all the previous teachings, and then finally explicitly in the last stages of the path, which we'll get to when we talk about the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. And we haven't got to the Bodhisattva path yet. We're still in the first one. So, the Four Noble Truths. It's Buddha's first teaching. He taught it when he first got enlightened under the tree, they say, in Bodh Gaya, and then eventually he removed all the obstacles from his mind. He became a Buddha. He removed all the obstacles to liberation, all the obstacles to omniscience, and he finally became a Buddha. Finally, completely freed his mind of all delusions and achieved the 2 wings of the bird: infinite wisdom, infinite compassion. So then he decided he'd start walking, start wandering about. So then he wandered mainly in the north part of India for the next 50 years, I think. He died at 80 something. So he was 29 or something then, I think. So then he started teaching. So he walked everywhere. So he went, I think it was east or west, I can't remember, to Varanasi. We go on our pilgrimage every year, but I always forget the map. And anyway, he walked from, it's about an 8-hour drive. So it must have been about a few day walk from, slowly walking. And he got to Varanasi. Whatever they called it before, and then a little place just a few miles out of Varanasi is called Deer Park. This big lovely place, still a park there, and it's where he taught his very first teaching to his previous disciples, the Four Noble Truths, the 4 truths for the noble ones, the 4 facts of life. So this is the very first way. The first way he presented things. He presented this concept of suffering. There is suffering. The first one is there is suffering. The second one is there are causes of it. The third is there is a state of freedom from it, cessation of suffering and its causes. And the fourth is the methods, how to do it. Speaking really simply, okay? So we've already discussed suffering in the first scope, in junior school. But here let's frame the whole thing together. So this one way of presenting this first of the 4 facts is in terms of 3 levels of suffering. And these levels of suffering also relate to the 3 levels of different levels of practice. It's all very coherent. The path is from different approaches, it all comes together to be the same thing. So the 3 levels of suffering are related to the, the one way of presenting the path to enlightenment is in terms of the 3 antidotes to those 3 levels of suffering. So the first kind of suffering is called the suffering of suffering. And it's very simple. In this life, we understand it very easily. As far as this human life is concerned, within this life, we know we have suffering. And this is what he means by one type of suffering. As we've discussed already, the broader view of the suffering is Buddha's entire view of the whole of samsara, all his entire worldview of the different realms of existence. And the suffering of suffering is the lower realms, the heavy duty suffering. The suffering realms of existence, which are the predominant expressions of the 3 main delusions: the animal realm, the spirit realm, and the hell realm. Ignorance, attachment, and aversion or anger. Buddha's view of the mind permeates the entire view of all these views are very integrated. The view about the mind, the view about karma, the view about suffering, the view about happiness, the levels of practices, the Lam Rim are all utterly integrated. And the more we study it, the more the pieces of the puzzle will fit together. It's all very coherent, Initially, of course, we can't see that. So the first kind of suffering in general, in the bigger picture point of view, is in terms of realms of existence within samsara. And there are some types of rebirth that are called the suffering of suffering, the lower realms. And there are some kinds of rebirth that are kind of like the top suburbs in samsara that are considered to be the goal. God realms, which is equivalent to Muslims' paradise and Christians' heaven. And that's where you want to go if you're a Christian. Well, that's called the suffering. Buddha would call, but Buddha, and that's what we call happiness in the bigger picture point of view. They're the happy realms. But for the Buddha, you're still in samsara. He went further. That's where he diverged from the Hindus. They too posit that type of rebirth, and they even posit a subtler one, which is called the form and formless realm, this deepest, subtlest absorption in concentration, meditation. And that for them is the peak of samsara. Now, the peak, that's for them is the liberation. That's when they achieved samadhi. But for the Buddha, they're still in samsara. That's Buddha's point. They haven't uprooted the root delusion. They've uprooted certain levels of delusions and certain levels of suffering. They've uprooted the suffering of suffering and the causes. They've uprooted the suffering of change and the causes, but they haven't uprooted the subtlest level of suffering. There are three kinds: suffering of suffering, lower realms, suffering of change, which we call happiness, and those God realms and these peak. And then the peak ones, this all-pervasive suffering, the subtlest level. So that's the bigger picture. But within this human realm, we can talk about the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change. And we can certainly talk about, for all sentient beings, the third kind, the all-pervasive suffering. So if you want to get rid of the suffering of suffering, you've got to practice junior school, abide by the laws of karma, stop causing future suffering. If you don't want diabetes, stop causing it, baby. Stop eating sugar. If you don't want lung cancer, baby, stop causing it. Stop smoking cigarettes. It's a very simple kind of approach, you know. You don't want future suffering? Check up now what are the causes and stop doing them. Pretty straightforward. So if you want to stop the future suffering of the suffering of suffering, then you better stop causing it. So that's junior school. Stop killing, stop stealing, stop lying, blah, blah, blah. Very simple. So you can guarantee you'll get another decent human rebirth and keep on bopping. So you quit the suffering of suffering. Now, though, you've got the suffering of change you want to get rid of. Human birth and God realms. So how are you going to quit that? And that's what we're going to talk about here. I'm going to get to the root of the problem by looking at the mind and looking at the delusions, in particular here, attachment. And then that's the final stages of practice, right at the end of the path where you practice, when you realize emptiness in the Bodhisattva path of the six perfections. That's when you quit all suffering altogether. Finally, all pervasive suffering. So all the path is laid out to counteract each of these stages of suffering, you know. Okay, so the first noble truth, there is suffering, three kinds: suffering of suffering, suffering of change, or pervasive suffering. Suffering of suffering is in the bigger picture, the lower realms, but within this human realm, and this is where we can understand it, within this human realm, we definitely have the suffering of suffering. That's when the bad things happen. The simplest way to put it is when the bad things happen. We understand that. When your boyfriend's mean to you, you get sick. Just look at the world, please, and look at the suffering. We know there's no complication about this. We know it is awful to be dying of COVID-19, to be sick, to be miserable, to be in a war zone, to be harmed, lied to, stolen from, killed, the bad things happening. This is environmental karma, like we've talked before, the two kinds. Environmental karma, when the physical world itself harms you, or experiences similar to the cause, where you're harmed by others. Everybody has this, and everybody does not want this. Super clear. That's the suffering of suffering as a residual result from the past causes. You've been in the lower realms in the past as a result of these causes. That's finished, but you haven't purified all aspects of it, and now you get the residual results of lying in this life. People continue to lie to you. The residual results of killing in the past. People kill you, or you die, or you get sick and die young. And that's why abiding by the laws of karma and living in vows and purifying is the guaranteed method to prevent with certainty the suffering of suffering. Lower realms, and certainly the grosser level of the suffering of suffering. You won't get killed, lied to, stolen from, harmed, be poor, sick, and all the other terrible sufferings, because you've purified in the first stages of practice. You've purified by stopping doing them in the framework of vows, and you've purified them by doing purification practice every day. This is the method to ensure next life you get a decent human body, decent human life with enough resources, access to the Dharma from all working hard on the Dharma. So that's the perfect human rebirth, you know. That's the suffering of suffering. Now we want to get rid of the suffering of change. And this is a tricky one. This is a difficult one for us. This is a really difficult one to understand it initially. This is why we read it, we give it a very simplistic reading. It just sounds very depressing. Buddha sounds very depressing. And we really can grossly misunderstand his advice and end up thinking they got it. And when we hear about we have to renounce suffering and its causes, we kind of chuck the baby out with the bathwater and think we have to become miserable and, nothing of a, miserable, unhappy, depressed person. It's such a gross misrepresentation of Buddha's teachings, But it's hard for us to hear it in any other way because our minds are so kind of punitive. We hear things as blame and guilt and bad, That's our problem. We do that. We're projecting those views onto Buddha's teachings. Just a second, please. Okay, so let's look then. What's Buddha mean by the suffering of change? The words are pretty straightforward. Well, it's depressing, very extremely depressing initially. So basically, as far as we're concerned, you think about our life, think about our lives. Since we're born up until now, we try our best every second of the day to get happiness and to avoid suffering. Think about it. It's such a simple way to put it. Think about it. The second the unhappy sound comes, the wrong taste, the wrong smell, just the babyest, tiniest experiences, we try to get away from them. We try to change it to something we do want. It's pretty primordial, isn't it? It's pretty clear. We want the nice feelings, we don't want the unnice feelings. We want the pleasant feelings, we don't want the unpleasant feelings. So I think before we go further into the Four Noble Truths, I really want to look at this. But let's first, I'll just say briefly the Four Noble Truths, just the outline. So again, the first one, we're looking now at the suffering of change. Second one. So the first one's simple enough. We was implied back in junior school. The suffering of suffering when the bad things happen. We applied that solution in junior school. We made a decision to stop killing and stealing and lying and bad mouthing and jumping on the wrong partner, etc., etc., etc. Why? Because we don't want future suffering. What kind of suffering? We don't want to be killed, lied to, stolen from, bad mouth, jumped on by the wrong person, or not to mention be born a worm. Whatever you like. So we looked at that. It was implicit in there. The teachings about the Four Noble Truths were implicit. Here now, let's be explicit about the second one, which is the suffering of change. This is a more advanced level of teaching. Okay, so simply speaking, like I said, we want happiness and we don't want suffering. Look at the universe. Monkeys and dogs and ants and humans, we all agree. Look at their behavior, you'll check the same, They get the wrong tasting food, they'll go away and try and find the right tasting food. We're all like that. It's just obvious and primordially, naturally within us, we want happiness and don't want suffering. But I think before we go further, I do want to now show exactly what is happiness and what is suffering. These are very interesting words. I mean, one of the Tony Steele, who runs our centre in Sydney, Vajrayana Institute, he in his own private life, he's got events companies and he runs these big conferences over the years. So 10, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, he started doing two big conferences in Sydney and in Melbourne, well, actually throughout Australia, different times, as a way of funding the centre, so he's got two. One is called Happiness and Its Causes, and one is called The Mind and Its Potential. So that, there's these big conferences where 5,000 people come, 50 speakers, 3 days, workshops, blah, 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 that kind of model. They're all online now, and they're not doing too badly. But he had His Holiness the Dalai Lama come. Well, that was always a certainty. People love His Holiness. But it was so fascinating because I talk at a couple of them. I get invited a couple of years because I'm one of the Buddhists in Australia. So, I give the little Buddhist one, 30-minute talk about different things, all these different topics. And they're wonderful conferences. People love them, So you have all these different views about what happiness is. And it's amazing, this collection of people all over the world, all these psychologists and therapists and neuroscientists and neuro this and something that, everybody coming up with different views about what happiness is. And it's totally fascinating. And it's really complicated. There are 47 definitions of happiness, Well, let's look at Buddha's. It's almost so simple, you're going to miss it. You think, it can't be that simple. You'll listen, you'll see it. It's so simple. There are 3 states, the Buddhist model of the mind. Excuse me. I'm jumping into causes here, going back and forth, but haven't even stated what the causes are yet, but we're going to state it first. We're going to go into it. Okay, so in the Buddhist model of the mind, this text, when you study it, Lorig, and I've mentioned this many times, you've heard it many times, coming from my mouth in this particular way, there are three, or Buddha, there's the psychological model of the mind, and this is the presentation of the contents of our mind. So we live at the grosser level. In our mental, we've got mental consciousness and we have sensory consciousness. Sensory, forget about that for now. Mental consciousness, there's different levels at which we function. The grossest level is called literally conceptuality, thoughts. So we live at that level. Then in meditation, when you get single point of concentration and you've subdued the sensory and the conceptual, you access a subtler level of mind. And that's this bigger point that we have to present to remind us that Buddha is asserting a subtle level of mind that has necessarily a subtle level of cognition. The job of mind is to cognize things, okay? So you've got grosser level, and then you've got this subtle level that we don't posit as existing in the West at all, in neuroscience. It does not, because it doesn't involve the brain. And this is a shocking part for us. So in that mental consciousness, we've got the subtle level of cognition, which we never access. And it's actually called perception, but it's got a very specific definition. We'll forget that for here. We'll go into that later. But we live at the grosser level, which is conceptuality. Now, what I'm getting at is now this. And all of those thousands of thoughts, from the second you wake up in the morning until the second you go to sleep, your mind is just, we know that, flooded, right, with these constant thoughts every millisecond. I mean, even in the West, we say there's 1,000 thoughts a second. Buddha agrees. So we're 99% of the time not paying any attention. We know that. And we'll go into all this in a minute. But the point is they're all divided into three categories, precisely, no fourth category. There's thousands of different thoughts and feelings and emotions, and unconscious and subconscious, divided into three categories. So simple: neurotic or deluded or disturbing. There are many synonyms. All the ego-based, unhappy, delusional, neurotic, distressing, disturbing, ridiculous states of mind that we are all intimately familiar with, and which the Buddha says are the cause of all suffering. And guess what, folks? Can be eliminated from the mind. This is the job we're going to get to seriously in this scope. Now, and they're called the root delusion, ego grasping, this primordial misconception of a self that underpins all the other branch delusions, and he's got 84,000 of them, but he subsumes all to three. There's three: ego grasping, known colloquially ignorance, ego grasping, which gives rise to attachment, which then gives rise to aversion or anger. These three, knowing even these three, and we're going to go into them, you will have a profound understanding of your own mind and the minds of others, I promise. The three root delusions, the three toxic emotions, the three poisons. And then you've got the second category, and these are our saving grace. These are our virtues: love, compassion, kindness, generosity, forgiveness. We know these states of mind. These are our saving grace. And these, for the Buddha, are what we can develop to perfection. Literally. These are in the core of our being. These are what define us. This other stuff is adventitious and can be rid of. This is primordially the center of all Buddhist practice and Buddhist psychology, this concept. So they've got the third lot now. What are they? Well, they call them neutral, but that really throws us because we assume that doesn't mean they're important. No, not like that. It means they're not negative and they're not positive. So what it means, it's got a very particular meaning in Buddhist psychology. So this third lot, that's why I prefer to call them the mechanics of our mind. And everybody's got these. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need good concentration. So this is a big misconception for us in the West, in modern, in the understanding of mindfulness, in the understanding of the word meditation. We've got this really real gross misconception, that mindfulness in its nature is good, that concentration in its nature is good, that meditation in its nature, not true. Not just not true. You know, thieves need mindfulness, as Lama Tsongkhapa puts it. Because when we understand this, theoretically, it's really necessary if you want to be a Buddhist. So this third category, there's many of these mechanics. You could not do anything. You couldn't accomplish even taking one step with your foot if these aren't working properly, and they're all working overtime. And only when you're the greatest yogi can you become familiar with them directly. So intention, attention, concentration, good memory, which is really the meaning of mindfulness, not some holy mystical thing. It just means not forgetting what you're doing moment by moment. Discrimination. There are many of these. And whether you're a murderer, a meditator, a sniper, a psychopath, a rapist, a saint, you need these to function, to fulfill the job you're trying to do. So that's the meaning of neutral. That's why I prefer to call mechanics. Now, what's going to be a surprise now, but you've got to hear my point as I'm finally getting to the point. Another one in that category is simply the word feeling. This comes up in the 5 aggregates of Buddha's teachings about the components of a person. This comes up in his Buddha's teaching about how we construct samsara every second, the 12 links of dependent arising. You keep hearing this word feeling when Buddha talks about it. What does he mean by it? Well, it's in the 3rd category. It is not a virtuous state of mind, and it's not a non-virtuous state of mind. So what it means is, there's only 3 kinds. There's only 3 possibilities: a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling. So let's just forget here neutral means neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Let's forget those for now, okay? So let's look at the pleasant and unpleasant feelings. And now we're getting to Buddha's very clear presentation of exactly what happiness is and what suffering is. It's so, as I said, it's so clear, it's so simple, it almost feels like it's too simplistic, you know? So feeling, so let's analyze what is a pleasant feeling. Well, first of all, we're discussing the mind, right? We're discussing the word feeling. That's called mind. It's not body. You've only got body and mind, people, for the Buddha. You have physical and you have mental. This is mental. Feeling is mental. It's not a virtue, it's not a non-virtue, but it's something that happens every millisecond. There's either a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling. Let's forget the neutral, okay? There's another one. We'll leave all that. Don't worry. Let's look at the pleasant and the unpleasant. Well, a pleasant feeling, what are some synonyms for it? Happy feeling, joy, bliss. I mean, if you've ever had such a thing, I've never had ecstasy or rapture, but people talk about that. Very, 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 very pleasant feelings. So in other words, pleasant feeling is a fairly base term, and you've got a vast spectrum from the most kind of the smallest, vaguely pleasant feeling to the most joyful, blissful, divinest one in the universe. You know, think about it. There's a spectrum. And a pleasant feeling is another word for the noun happiness. Now, why do we have 47 definitions? I'll tell you why, from the Buddhist perspective, is because we are so addicted to the external world being the cause of our happy feelings or being the cause of our unpleasant feelings that, you know, we conflate them. So if I'm in love with, where's my boyfriend today? No, it's going to have to be, no, where's my boyfriend? I can't think of one. Where is one? Oh, there's Yuval, my boyfriend today, Yuval. So if I'm in love with Yuval, we know, and you'll see me blissing out. You'll see me so happy. Robina, tell me about your happiness. And what will I do? You know, I will give you a detailed description of the divine qualities of Yuval. When you have memories, think about this. When you remember something, and you remember the thing that was, you had a joyful night with your boyfriend when you're 22 years ago, who's now dead or something. You'll remember the event. You'll describe the event. You'll describe the person. If you had a joyful experience eating a delicious meal, you'll describe the meal. In other words, we are so addicted, and this is what Buddha means by being in samsara. We are so addicted to the philosophical view in the bones of our being that the cause of my happy feelings is the cake, the boyfriend, the event, the beautiful house, you name it. So we're so addicted to that. That's what we think of as happiness. But to the Buddha, that is the catalyst. The boyfriend is a mere catalyst. A mere catalyst. The food is a mere catalyst. There's nothing intrinsically happy about cake or boyfriends. And that's proof, because when Yuval gives me up for a younger version, and now he just thinking about him triggers the most raging, unpleasant feelings. So it's obvious it's not Yuval. But we've got to do this analysis to prove it to be true, not just believe this. This is logic. So for the Buddha, by definition, happiness and suffering are states of mind. It's crystal clear. States of mind. A cake hasn't got happiness in its nature. If it did have, the more you ate it, the happier you'd get. We'd all be enlightened 42 eons ago. If Yuval had intrinsic deliciousness in his body, then just, you know, the more I ate him up for breakfast, the more I get happy. But we know that's not true. We've got to do this analysis. This is the high school analysis. This is looking at suffering and its causes analysis, and the deeper level, the mind, understanding the nature of mind, what it is, what are delusions, what are virtues, what are neutral. That's why you've got to study the mind. You can't just say these words thinking we know that we're all understanding. We're not. There are different definitions here, and we're talking Buddha's definition, which is so precise. Happiness is the mind, the senses as well. Yes, that's sensory consciousness. Sensory consciousness, mental consciousness. So every millisecond of the day, you're having some kind of feeling. Forget the neutral. So if you tracked your day, think about it. If you tracked your day like a little graph, like the up and down movement on the stock market or the whatever it is on the, you have a graph. So normally, tell me about your day, Robina, and I will proceed to describe, won't I, the external events. Oh, the weather was lovely this morning. The breakfast was delicious. Or the noise on the road was really loud, or the phone rang too many times. I'll describe the events. But let's map our mind internally. Okay? First 3 minutes of the day, pleasant feelings, and then suddenly unpleasant because a loud noise happened to come. But the internal is the unpleasant, then vaguely unpleasant, then kind of a bit neutral, and then really pleasant, very, very, very pleasant because Yuval called me, and then down again unpleasant because Yuval didn't call me. You can track your day beautifully, pleasant and unpleasant. Forget the neutral. And we need to learn to do that. That's it, pleasant and unpleasant feelings. I mean, you wouldn't have a conference. I mean, you would if you want what the definition of happiness. You wouldn't need a conference. Just give you have a sentence. Then you've got to do the analysis and to prove it to be true. Happiness is mental and a sensory consciousness. It's the mind that experiences happiness. Cakes and bodies are just catalysts. It's the best way to think Buddha's view about happiness and its causes. So, what's the point here? The point now is this. The suffering of suffering, even forget the lower realms, okay? But just in this life, think about when the unpleasant things happen, when the thing that, okay, when Yuval doesn't call me, or when Yuval cheats on me, or when the food is revolting, think of the external thing. As far as we are concerned, if we were asked, what is the cause of my happiness, and I were even to analyze it and to agree with you that the pleasant feeling is in here, then for sure I would say Yuval is the cause of my pleasant feelings. And then when he gives me up for a younger version and I've got these painful, angry, broken-hearted feelings, I would definitely agree again that now Yuval is the cause of my suffering. That is a given for us. This is the world. This is what ego thinks. This is what the materialist philosophical view presents. Now, Buddha's not being fundamentalist and says you can't have handsome Yuvals or nice chocolate cakes. Go for it, he says, but just don't misrepresent their power and role in your happiness. When you got it down, you can enjoy your Yuvals without losing the plot. So we've got a massive misconception, he says. So he's not saying there's anything wrong. Now, this is Mike. Now getting to the point, another point. He's not suggesting that we shouldn't have happy feelings. Because when we think of suffering and happiness, and then we think, we start to get guilty. Oh, I should give up happiness. So now let's look into Buddha's view. Let's look at Buddha's view now. And this is where we start to articulate it properly, be more precise about, explicit. We look at the second noble truth. So again, the first noble truth is there is suffering. The first kind of suffering is when the bad things happen. Yuval cheats on me. The second kind of suffering is called the suffering of change. So that's what we call happiness. So suffering is what we call when the bad things happen, and happiness we call is when the good things happen. So as far as I'm concerned, the cause of my suffering is when Yuval cheats on me, but the cause of my happiness is when Yuval loves me. So that's our analysis, roughly speaking, which is fairly logical. You can deduce it logically. Look at the world's behavior. That's how we can deduce by people's behavior that we all believe the bad thing is the cause of suffering. That's why we divorce the husband, hate him, sue him, drop bombs on him. And we can deduce that the child, the beautiful baby, and the lovely husband are the cause of happiness. That's why we keep going home to them. So Buddha says, it's fine, you're partially right. You've got some of it right, but you've not got the main point. So let's look at that point, Buddha's point. So as far as he's concerned, in the second noble truth, he tells us now there are causes, and this is really vital. We all know that if you've got a problem in life, any kind of problem with your car, with making a cake, in your relationship, which is more complicated, you've got to first establish what the problem is. You can vaguely feel there's some problem, but you can't establish exactly what the problem is. If you can't establish exactly what the problem is, you can't go further. And then your crucial job is, once you've established the name of the problem, which is already pretty good, now you've got to find the cause of it. Once you've established the cause of the problem, that implies the solution. It's so obvious. So here, there's suffering of suffering. We dealt with that a bit in the first one. Now let's look at a deeper analysis of suffering of change. As far as we are concerned, there is only two: there's suffering and happiness. Suffering is when the bad things happen, and happiness is when the good things happen. Buddha's view is more nuanced, because he adds a third kind of suffering, the pervasive suffering. So his analysis of the second kind of suffering, he agrees the first one is when bad things happen. But the second one for him, and this is the depressing part, is that what we call happiness, which is when the good things happen, is what he calls the suffering of change, a subtler, more nuanced level of suffering. So now let's look at the causes of suffering. So the first one, suffering of suffering, we've done that in the first stages of practice. We've about looking at the law of karma. You know, we're looking at the law. So because Buddha says in here, in the second noble truth, he states precisely two things. There are two main causes of suffering. You can imply by that, you flip it over, and that also tells us there must be two causes of happiness, which is very encouraging. But here the framework is suffering. You've got to pull the weeds out before you start growing the flowers. So that's what suffering is. So, okay. This is where he gets into the law of cause and effect. We discussed this already in junior school with karma. But if we look at it here, you know, the natural law that runs the universe, as far as Buddha is concerned, is the law of cause and effect. So clearly there are hundreds and hundreds of causes that have to come together to produce anything. It's not very simple. It's not just like the two things. There's hundreds of causes. Just for a flower, there are so many causes that have to come together. But you can narrow it down, can't you, to main causes and secondary causes. And when you study Buddhist philosophy, you study many types of causes, many kinds, secondary causes, you know, substantial causes, direct causes, blah, 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 many kinds. It's quite analytical and quite precise. And we need to be that. But simply speaking here, we can see pretty generally with a flower, there are many causes. You must have some earth, or whatever they do now with these non-earth things in, I don't know, all these other ways they grow things. I don't know the words. This is the old-fashioned way. You've got to have some moisture. You need some warmth. You've got to have some time, but you've got to have a seed, baby. So surely we can see clearly with a seed, the rose, the main cause of a rose is a rose seed. But you can hold a rose seed in the sky up for 57 years. You won't get a rose bush. You need the secondary conditions because it's a dependent arising. There are many, many things that all have to come together to work beautifully, harmoniously, to produce a rose. Well, look at the world. Everything is like that. Everything is like that. The tiniest thing, just to produce the smallest thing, needs many causes to come together. Or to produce the smallest experience in our life. So many things, it's far more complex. So many causes and conditions have to all come together, you know. It's so clear. So let's just talk about this moment of happiness. There's a moment I can locate called suffering. And as far as I'm concerned, that moment of suffering came when Yuval told me, when I discovered he's leaving me, he told me. I came home and there's a note, I've left you. And then that second, I can say that's the beginning of this unbearable suffering. And then someone says, why are you suffering, Robina? Well, of course, I'm not going to go, well, you know, there must have been some past karma and I did this and because of this and therefore this. And he met this girl last week and therefore this and because of that. And the weather was this way. And he's got this weird mind when it's on the 5th of January. There's 37 causes. I won't tell you all that. I'll just say, he is the cause of my suffering, period. We know that. There's one cause and it's Yuval. It's just not. Buddha says we're being irrational, completely hysterical. It's far more subtle than that, he's saying. Put it another way, very simple. Yes, the main cause, but he is not his own. But the Buddhist way of saying, I'm sorry, scratching my nose all the time. He is not the main cause of suffering, but you can't discount him. It is no question that his action of cheating on me, his action of giving me up, of course it's it's one of the causes, but it's merely the best way to put it is it's like the earth, not the seed for the rose. It's a crucial one, but it's not the main cause. So no, sorry, Robina, you've got it wrong, Buddha says. His action is not the main cause. It's just one of the secondary causes. So what are the causes, Buddha? Excuse me, Buddha, what are the causes of suffering? Well, there are two, Robina, just two, honey, two main causes. And they're both inside you, sweetie pie. One is your past action of doing something similar to this person here, like that. And second, the delusion that drove that action is the second cause. And they both subsume to the one, the delusions. That's it. That's his analysis. And then we have to unpack all that. That's his analysis. There are two main causes of my suffering. One, my past action, karma, driven by a delusion. Those two then sowed a seed in my mind that now 47 lives later, I meet Yuval again, and then karma ripens. Boom, you know. I mean, simplistically, but that's it, essentially. And happiness is exactly the same analysis. Just to remind us to get, feel better. Why are you happy, Robina? Oh, Yuval's so kind to me. No, that's not the main cause. He's merely a secondary cause. Main cause of your happiness, Robina, is your past virtuous action 42 lives ago of being kind to Yuval, driven by your virtue. That's the main, they're the cause of your happiness, sweetheart. So this is where we go into more detail about what we've learned first in the first scope about karma, that we're the boss. And this is a technical answer. It's not punitive. It's not blame, which is exactly how we hear it. Because ego wants to be getting off. This is the biggest one. We start to look at the mind more deeply. As we study more deeply and practice more deeply, we're going to notice the instinct of ego is to be innocent. The instinct of ego has to feel I'm an innocent victim and things are done to me unfairly. Now, I don't mind that I win the lottery, which seems to be unfair. I didn't do anything to deserve winning $1,000 in a lottery, but I don't care if it's unfair. Give me more, please. But when Yuval cheats on me, and I seem to have done nothing to deserve it in this life, then we're outraged. That's how ego works, It's a bit intense, but this is how it is. So there are two causes of my suffering. So now here, in general, that means the actions I've done in the past, the negative actions of harming sentient beings, and driven by the delusions, attachment and aversion, and all the rest. That's why I get harmed, killed, lied to, stolen from, bad-mouthed, I'm poor, sick, live in war zones, whatever. Or born in the lower realms. So we're solving that problem. We're trying to get, we're trying to apply the antidotes to all of that, the grossest level of suffering in the first scope. Now we've got to get to touch with the subtler causes. And we've got to get into the mind itself, which drives those actions that we dealt with in the first scope. Anger and attachment drive the body and speech to do actions that harm others, which all, of course, harm ourselves. So now we're going to get to the delusions, which are what drive the body and speech. We harness the body and speech in the first scope, which solves the problem of suffering, which is where we get harmed. Now we're getting to the root of the problem. We're going to start subduing the mind itself. Now here is where we have to understand the delusions. So we start with the three poisons. There's 84,000 different ridiculous states of mind, Buddha says, but they all subsume to these three. 21,000 are rooted in the ego grasping, as Lam Rim says. 21,000 are rooted in attachment. 21,000 are rooted in aversion, and the other 21,000 are rooted in all three. It's like an entire elaborate, coherent map of the mind. And this came from the Indians more than 3,000 years ago. It wasn't Freud, I'm sorry to disappoint you, that first started looking at the mind. Well, these Indians, 3,000 years ago, they were at it. And only just now, we ignorant people in our modern culture are discovering these geniuses, So let's look at these three toxic emotions, three poisons. If we can understand these three, we can really begin to understand ourselves and other people, I tell you. Because this model of the mind, by the way, surprisingly enough, doesn't just refer to humans. It refers to all living beings, hells, spirits, animals, humans, gods, anti-gods, form and formless realm. All of them. It's an entire vast world view, and this view of the view that covers all beings. So, okay. Ego grasping, the root one, we get into that when we get to the bodhisattva path and we learn to understand emptiness, which uproots that one. It's the subtlest one. But it's broadly here, it's the root delusion, the root affliction, the root misconception, the root neurosis, whatever word you want, primordially deep inside us. And it's at the level of deepest assumption. And it's an assumption of a concrete, solid, separate, set in stone, intrinsic, permanent, independent me. And it's necessarily totally miserable. And it's rooted in fear. Totally instinctive. But most of the time like a sleeping lion. And then its main voice the one that he gives rise to. And this effectively is the main cause of our suffering in day-to-day life. And this is what we really have to learn to deal with in this second scope of practice. Attachment, attachment. Multifaceted. As we've talked many times, the deepest level of it, we become completely programmed with it from the first second of conception in our mummy's womb. So we come out into this life programmed completely with the deepest expression of this attachment from practicing it from countless lives. And that's this primordial, aching feeling of dissatisfaction. I am not enough. I do not have enough. No matter what I get, not enough. You can see it with babies. Yeah, they might be starving, but you can see some babies just blissfully content. Some babies just are miserable because we're born with this deep dissatisfaction. And then as we develop, we become utterly miserable, isolated, lonely. I'm not enough. I haven't got enough. He doesn't love me enough. No matter what I get, it's never enough. How much my mother does for me, not enough. We blame. It brings rise to incredible anger. It's the most tortured experience. And Lama Tsongkhapa says it's the main suffering in the modern world, dissatisfaction, this energetic level of attachment. So because we're dissatisfied with things out there, but especially with ourself, and that's when we call it self-hate. That's when it's called self-hate. I am nothing. I am not enough. And we have this self-loathing. That's the result of attachment. Unbelievable non-stop craving, so sad, so tragic, so suffering. Then the next level of it in this daily life, because I don't feel I've got enough or have enough or am enough, of course, it rises. The next level of attachment is to hanker after something. What's missing? So where do you go first? Objects of the senses. Pretty obvious. The first level of our reality is out there. The objects of the five senses, the people, the things, the handbags, the money, the whatever, the grosser level, the five senses, the grosser level. And then convinced attachment, the next level, this is all attachment. The next level of attachment is that hankering, then the next level of attachment. And all this is based on the assumption of attachment that I am not enough. And then for the assumption of attachment that happiness is out there somewhere. Happiness is out there somewhere. So we're looking for it desperately. Then the eyes land on Yuval or the chocolate cake or whatever it is. And then attachment is going demented, berserk in its over-exaggeration of the deliciousness of Yuval and the role he should play in making me happy. This is all unspoken. This is instinctive. It's like a vampire. Then the next level of attachment, manipulate to get Yuval and then to hold on to possess Yuval. We recognize all of this. But the primordial way of presenting what attachment is this bottomless pit, this frantic, fear-based, bottomless pit of emotional hunger that's desperate every second to get what the supposed I wants. And it's really quite frantic. So basically it's a junkie mind. I'm not joking when I say these cliched things, but I'm serious trying to get us to understand it. The attachment is it's the mind of a junkie, but we're all junkies, Buddha says. It's a question of the object and a question of degree. And that's not sarcastic. That is literal. We all agree in our culture that attachment for something is really serious, very bad when it's serious, like you jump on 14 girls every day or you take heroin or whatever all day. We only think it's serious we only think attachment's bad when it's serious, and we call it junkie or addiction. Well, that's another synonym for attachment, addiction, basically. But it's very subtle levels of it, and it's for everything. And it's the view of a person who thinks they're nothing. That's the irony of ego in Buddhism. So now it runs the show. This junkie inside us is desperate every millisecond to get only. Another way to put it is this is the broad way of putting what attachment is. It's this junkie inside us that's desperate every second to only get the nice things. Why? Because you think that's happiness. So when you get the contact with the cake or Yuval or the pretty flower or the nice music, now this is the point now where we have to do real analysis. We have to study the mind deeply and do proper analysis. So it is true that when my ears, our ear consciousness makes contact with Miles Davis's music, it is true, definitely a pleasant feeling is triggered in my mind. That's fact. Buddha does not agree. Now, our analysis says that Miles Davis is the cause of my happiness. Buddha says no. Miles is merely the catalyst to trigger a pleasant feeling that's in your body, in your mind, Robina. And that pleasant feeling of yours is in your mind. That's in your mind. It can't come from Miles Davis. It can't come from a cake. It can't come from something physical. That's ridiculous. It's mental. So then you've got to look at what is the cause of the happy feeling then. Now we're getting to the real nuts and bolts. So forget Mars. Mars is a catalyst, okay? It's true. It triggers a pleasant feeling. It wakes up this pleasant feeling. But you've got to ask the question, why is there in my mind even the potential to have a happy feeling? What's the cause of that? Well, I'll tell you, a past virtuous action. This sounds hilarious to us. So this is the point that's literal in Buddhism. Every time you do a virtuous action, at a simple level would be an action of generosity to a human being, giving them $5 based on compassion. There's two things, the action, karma, and the virtue, compassion. So that one action of generosity, it pops a seed in your mind. It pops a seed in your mind. And that seed's going to multiply and multiply and multiply. And one day, one of those seeds will ripen as a moment of you receiving something. Even the pleasant feeling itself. Forget the action of generosity, but even a virtuous thought, a thought of generosity, a thought of compassion goes in your mind, leaves a seed in there, and then in the future it will ripen as a moment of pleasure in your mind. Literally, that is the cause of a pleasant feeling in your mind. Your past virtue is the main cause of your pleasant feeling this second. The Miles Davis music simply kind of wakes it up, triggers it, because we don't know how else to trigger the pleasant feeling. So we rely upon the external object, and then we misconceive the external object and give it more power than it's got, and we think that Miles Davis's music, that's the cause of happiness. Yuval is the cause of happiness. So of course I'm going to grasp onto him like a vampire. Why? Because I want pleasant feelings, please. This is the Buddha's analysis. So you want pleasant feelings in the future, honey? Have virtuous thoughts now, right now. And you'll have a bucket load of pleasant feelings in the future. You'll have no choice but to be happy. Why do you think Dalai Lama is always happy? Because he's quit the causes of suffering. He's only got virtue in his mind. He's just got bucket loads of happiness, no matter what happens. He's got compassion, virtue, all these things, because he's perfected his own mind. He's cut all the causes of suffering, and he's perfected virtue and goodness. So there's not a possibility to have anything other than a pleasant feeling. There's not a possibility ever in the universal time of constant billions of eons in the future for a Buddha's mind ever to have anything other than a pleasant feeling. Their mind is pervaded by pleasant feelings, joy, bliss, clarity, all the positive things, because they're our true nature. I'm getting a bit carried away here, going too far in this analysis, but never mind, get the point. Now, this is where we start. Okay, that's another discussion. So, okay, pleasant feeling is happiness. We want happiness. Buddha says, I get it. And I've got some methods, honey. This is where he's telling us his methods. It's not spelt out like this, but we've got to deduce it, you know. He's telling us at this point, no, Yuval and the cake are not the main cause of your happiness. He doesn't give us the big picture yet. So it seems a sort of bit like mummy being cruel. She's got her wisdom. She's keeping it quiet, you know. So what's Buddha's wisdom here? What's implying his teaching here? Why is he saying to us, you know, the main cause? Why is he telling us, okay, why is he telling us that the happiness I'm having now with Yuval is actually a subtle level of suffering? That sounds cruel. That sounds mean, you know, doesn't it? Like he's saying, I'm not allowed to have any happiness. He's not saying that. He just says, I'm misconceiving the cause of it. So what I'm doing is believing. So attachment over-exaggerates, back to Yuval now. My attachment is hungry. It wants happiness. It thinks that Yuval will give it to me because I don't know how to get it for myself. So I think he is the cause. Attachment is then conveniently exaggerates Yuval's deliciousness, makes him look way more handsome than he is. It blinds me from seeing anything else about him. Because, you know, it's a liar. Attachment's a liar. It over-exaggerates his deliciousness. It over-exaggerates his power in making me happy. It makes me believe that he actually is the cause of my happy feelings. So then I have all this massive expectation when I move in with him and now anticipate the next 80 years of perfect happiness, and Yuval is the cause of it. So, of course, what am I doing? Setting myself up for unbelievable suffering because I'm believing in a bunch of lies. So now, look, what are the lies and what are the truths here? Just keeping it simple to one example of one contact, like the Miles Davis music. Wanting happiness? Fine, Buddha says. Go for it. Tick the box. Perfect to want happiness. Nothing wrong. But we got attachment, which exaggerates and believes and puts it out there. So I believe that getting Miles will make me happy. So then I listen to Miles. My attachment exaggerates his deliciousness. And then I grasp at it and cling to it and keep wanting it because I'm never satisfied with the moment of happiness I get. It does trigger pleasant feelings, definitely does trigger pleasant feelings. Buddha doesn't argue with that. But they don't last, do they? So I've got to listen to Miles again. The delicious time I had with Yuval, the pleasure that I did have, it's real pleasure that did arise in my mind, fact, but it didn't last, did it? And this is the real tragedy now about the suffering of change. And this is logical proof. This is scientific, but we don't like to hear it. The logic to prove that Yuval is not the main cause of my happy feelings is that, yes, on first contact, you know, or stick to Miles, on first contact with that sound of music, that music, it's blissful, isn't it? It really does trigger the best blissful feeling. There's no doubt it does. The blissful feeling is the mind. It's not happy. It's not virtue or non-virtue. It's a happy feeling. Nothing wrong with happy feelings. The more pleasure, the better, Lama Yeshe says. So it's a fact that Miles, the sound, triggers a pleasant feeling. Fact. Now, attachment thinks that Miles is the main cause of the pleasant feelings. And I know if I have the music on for 3 minutes and then I stop the music, the pleasant feelings stop, don't they? They stop. So I've got to turn the music on again. So the logic is that Miles is the cause of my happy feelings. So if that's true, hear this, please. If it's true, then the more I have Miles Davis music playing, not 3 minutes or 5, but 24 hours, 36 hours, 4 days, 5 days. If I keep having Miles Davis music playing day and night, it is logical that if I believe he's the cause of my happy feelings, that my happy feelings will increase as time goes by. Now, we know that is not true. I want to kill Miles Davis after the first 5 hours. I'll be exhausted and irritated and freaked out and eventually get so angry. Every object you can think of in the universe that you've ever had contact with via your senses, from the most delicious divine boyfriend in the universe, it's going to be the same thing. So it's proof. Yuval, contact with Yuval, is not the main cause of pleasant feelings. He does trigger some, but they don't last, which is the key point the Buddha is making. And that's why he calls this happiness, which is happiness, the suffering of change, because it doesn't last. Because as Lama Zopa says, you get the pleasure, but you're not satisfied. Look at the cup of tea. Look at the cup of coffee, my morning tea, whatever I have in the morning. I'm so delicious, you know. The night before, I'm thinking about it. You wake up in the morning, I'm doing my practice. I'm anticipating my delicious chai, whatever it is that I'm going to have that morning. You make it all delicious. And best thing, the right amount of cardamom, the right amount of milk or whatever you have in it, the right amount of honey, you're anticipating. I get the first mouthful. It triggers pleasure, fact. But I'm not happy with that moment, am I? Greedily anticipating the second mouthful and then greedily anticipating the second cupful. And by the time you're finished, it was always disappointing. The second cup was never the same as the first, and you never learn. That's the way attachment works. And then eventually you stop. And if I had a third cup, think about it. This is where we're junkies. You have a third cup. Why? Because you're not satisfied with the pleasure the first one gave. You're not satisfied. That's really what's happening. I'm listening to Miles, and my first moment of listening to him blissed you out. But what we're not noticing is the mind is still not satisfied. It's blissful, but already you're greedily saying, give me more Miles. And then you get the second moment of Miles and the third, and you're greedily wanting more until eventually you're exhausted. And now it has changed from pleasant feelings inexorably into unpleasant feelings. This is logic. You just have to do the analysis of your own actions every second, precisely, knowing what feeling is, knowing what attachment is, knowing what aversion is. You have to know the names. It's a technical thing you have to do, not some vague thing about feelings. We're so gross the way we think about these things in modern psychology, you know. Are we communicating, people? We've been talking for a long time. Are we communicating here? Now I need you to ask me some questions. Come on. Then I'll tell you Buddha's solution. That's the bonus. I'll tell you Buddha's solution. But meanwhile, ask some questions.
If you have any question, please unmute yourself or raise your hand or type in the chat if you'd like me to ask.
Nobody?
Yes, Laura. I see Laura's hand.
Okay, girl, talk to me. Yeah.
Hello, thank you, Venerable Robina.
Hello, sweetheart.
My question is, if our happiness is in truth the suffering of change.
Your voice sounds a bit cracked or something. Can you, I don't know what's happening.
So if our happiness is in fact the suffering of change.
I really can't do it all now. It's about weird.
I'll ask later.
Go on. If what? What's the question?
Right. Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so if happiness, if what we consider happiness is in fact suffering, which I agree and I perfectly understand, it makes complete sense.
Say it in your words, but say it in your words why, to spell it out and using Buddhist terminology, why you think it is suffering. You said you agree, so just explain it.
Because it doesn't last. It just simply doesn't last. Yeah.
So what doesn't last? Which pleasure doesn't last?
Anyone. So the moment of
no, we're being more precise here. It's the way. So I'm sure you're saying this, but I want to get clear. So what you are agreeing that Buddha says the pleasure that we get in contact with a sense object, the pleasure that it does trigger, which is pleasure, doesn't last. That's what you're saying.
That's right.
Not just all pleasure.
Yes.
It's not true. It's the pleasure that's triggered in dependence upon an object of attachment that doesn't last. That's the precise point, Laura. So
then not.
Otherwise, you're being nihilistic. Otherwise, you're being completely nihilistic.
No. Okay, that's fine. So an object of attachment is an object that.
That's the whole point.
Okay. Go on. So an object of attachment is an object that, based on my perception of it, is seen as completely perfect, and I sort of overestimate its qualities. Or because I'm thinking
whatever the object is that you've got attachment for, attachment being a liar over exaggerates the deliciousness of that object and is convinced that when you get it, it will bring happiness and you believe it'll last. So all Buddha is telling us is the pleasure that is triggered by contact with an object of attachment doesn't last. That's the precise point. So given that, what's your question?
My question then was, because my question wasn't precise, then my question was, well, then renunciation is about realizing that there is no hope for happiness in this life, because happiness will not last.
Totally depressing and nihilistic. No.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, how the Lamas talk. If you rely, but you got to qualify it, Laura. That's just nihilistic what you said.
Okay. Let's talk about, I don't know. Say you have a boyfriend or a partner, and you realize that they've got sort of shortcomings as well as good things, and then
not about them. This is not about nothing to do with the boyfriend. This is nothing to do with them. Don't even discuss the object. This is not a discussion of the object. Nothing to do with the object, Laura. It's about our own mind, about the attachment in our mind that this emotional hunger that over-exaggerates the boyfriend's deliciousness and dumps this responsibility on him to give me happy feelings. That's what we're discussing. I don't care the boyfriend. If he could be a Buddha or he could be a creep. That's not the issue here. That's not the issue here.
Okay.
It's what attachment is and analyzing attachment, understanding how it is a distortion, how it exaggerates. I mean, this is quite a subtle point.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Is that enough for you now, you think?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Got to analyze? Okay, good. Thanks.
Okay, Venerable Robina, Stephania's microphone doesn't work, so I'm just going to ask her. And it's in the chat. The fact that Miles Davis triggers happy feelings in you, but Chet Baker, I don't know him, triggers in me or rock music for somebody else. Are those triggers random? And what decides that Miles Davis?
Nothing's random. If there's a law, there's nothing random as a contradiction in terms. Karma is a natural law. So the conditions that cause, a particular object to be seen as delicious by me and another one by you is due to our past karmic, our past tendencies. There's many, many factors. What we bring into us in this life, our tendencies, our habits, I mean, for some people, killing fish makes them happy. Some people, torturing makes them happy. It's all a question of you come into this life programmed with certain tendencies and certain approaches and certain tastes. And then the way that, and then knows how those tastes have been, conditioned in this life. There's many, many, many factors involved. Not possibly, of course, it's not random. It couldn't possibly be random. Not possible. Nothing can be random in the law of karma. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think it's quite clear.
Another question.
And the next one will be coming from Alona. Could you please unmute yourself?
Alona, what's your question, darling?
Hello, Venerable. Thank you for your talk.
Good.
I'm wondering about this attachment and the hunger. Then I recognize it so well. I'm so intimately familiar with that hunger all the time. And but like it triggers pleasant feeling, and I know.
I'm getting a bit lost now. So just ask the question, Alona. What's the question?
I understand the logic of it, but I'm still going for a good feeling.
That's right. And, we haven't finished the story yet. We're going one step at a time.
Okay.
We're pointing out all the mistakes that Buddha's telling us, the mistakes we're making. So we've got to first establish the mistake. And then once you're clear about the mistake, you can solve the problem. So one step at a time, Alona. That's what we're looking at. The Buddha's whole entire path is how to get happy feelings all the time. That's the point. So we're looking at why we don't get them now. So when you first establish the mistakes, then you can start to fix the mistakes, and then you'll end up with getting happy feelings. That's the long-term goal, baby. Are you with me?
Yes. Yes.
So one step at a time. We're looking. We're going to analyze why our recipe is not working first. The assumption is, yes, Buddha's goal, or Buddha, this is why when you listen to teachings, like you listen to Mahamudra teachings, you read the literature about the nature of mind, it's very uplifting, because the Buddha's view is our mind is naturally pure. Our mind is naturally joyful. Joy and bliss and virtue are innate in our minds. So when we start to hear about that, then we can be a bit enthusiastic. And that's why in the beginning we can misunderstand the teachings and think that Buddha's telling us we're not even allowed to be happy. We're sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. No, not a question of that at all. We're establishing the mistake. The whole reason for this. Listen, Alona, if there were no possibility to ever get happy feelings, then why bother? It's just too sadistic to do this. Give up. Just die now. The long-term view is for you to discover your own blissful nature and discover who you really are and become this marvelous, happy, blissful person. So then you add to the compassion when you help others with it. That's the long-term goal, honey. That's why we're even doing this work. Are you seeing what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, good. What else, people? Who else? Anybody?
There's no questions in the chat at this moment.
Okay, fine. Okay, so then what Buddha's telling us, so there's various things I'm saying here, going to a lot of detail, but that's good, it's okay, is we first have to understand the model of the mind. First understand the Buddha's view of the mind, which we would study at this point. You know, how we've got positive, negative, and neutral states of mind. We have to learn to distinguish between them. This is the key job. You know, so here we're discussing a whole bunch of things. We were discussing Yuval. We're discussing there's a person, right? I've got karma connection with him. We meet together due to our past karma. But we've got good qualities as well. He's got love. He's got kindness. He's generous. We have a good life. He's kind to me. He looks up. You know, we've got many, many, many good things there as well. There's some good things in this relationship. We're not just saying the whole thing is bad. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But we're trying to see the cause of the problems. And this is my job. That's why I said to, Laura, don't worry about what your boyfriend is. That's not the issue here. It could be Hitler or Mother Teresa we're discussing. That's not the issue here. We're discussing our mind. So we're looking, so then I've got to realize, what are the good things in my mind in relation to Yuval? Well, I've got love for Yuval. Now, what's that? That's in the second category. Now, this to some degree, Alona, is already answering your question. I've got virtues in my mind. This is how come we have any halfway reasonable relationship. If I mainly only had attachment and anger and jealousy and all the others, I'd be a vampire. I would eat Yuval for breakfast and spit out the bones. So love and compassion and kindness and generosity and forgiveness, they are also in my mind. That's what makes us have some reasonable good relationship. Now, even without going further and becoming more subtle, Alona, even the Buddha's saying right here, you want to be more happy, be less attached, less angry, less jealous, less resentful, don't kill, don't steal. So in other words, one of the main consequences of you working in junior school, stopping killing, lying, stealing, and you giving up attachment, anger, and jealousy and pride, an immediate benefit, immediate consequence of that is you are more happy. Logically, naturally. Can you hear that, Alona? So this is why when you look at the karmic causes, even so the karmic cause, is a technical point, why that one moment of pleasure arises in my mind, catalyzed by hearing that sound called Miles Davis, that's the catalyst, the secondary cause. But we've got to ask the question, what is the main cause of that moment of pleasure rising in my mind? It's my past virtuous action that dropped a karmic seed in my bank vault that is now ripening literally as a pleasant feeling. So even that immediately right there, Alona, is the answer. Are you hearing me, Alona? Can you hear that? So that's why we hear it. We hear the lamas say, oh, being compassionate is the cause of happiness. Helping others is the cause of happiness. Love and compassion are the cause of happiness. And it sounds like kind of, oh, too exhausting. Give me a break. Can't I have a cake? You know? It's sort of like we just don't hear it properly. It seems very kind of like you've got to be a saint for God's sake. Because instinctively, the ego thinks cake is the cause of happiness and boyfriends are the cause of happiness and having a massage is the cause of happiness. I've got to go out and being kind to people all day. It seems very tiring, but it's literally true. And you can see with some people, I mean, you can see with some people, don't forget about seeing, you know, Dalai Lama, but just some people who are always happy and they're out there helping people and they're just happy people. We get confused, you know, why are they so happy? Because they don't have much delusions. They're not so attached. They're not so angry. They're not so jealous. Their mind is more spacious. They're more empathetic. They're more loving. And that's from past practice, not just this life. So they are more happy. I mean, that's the simplest answer, but it sounds like being a goody-goody and it sounds tiring. But it's logical if we do the analysis properly. So I have those. So if there's any reasonable, if Yuval and I can look at our relationship, and I could look at my component of my relationship with Yuval, and I could track my days and see the times when there was some kind of happiness, it's because my mind was more virtuous. When my mind is more attached, I'm unhappy. When my mind is more angry, I'm unhappy. I mean, we're not talking karma here. We're talking right this second, because the delusions, as soon as the delusions are prevailing in your mind is constricted, is tight, is separate, is kind of miserable. This is logical. You know it if you analyze it. When I'm connected with Yuval, when I'm reaching out to Yuval, when I'm being patient, or it's hard work, or loving or compassionate, my mind is more spacious. That's when the mind is happy. That's when the mind is happy. Right now, long-term happiness, long-term cause is my past virtue. But right this second, when my mind is more open, connected, loving, kind, compassionate, and of course we have to work on that. That's naturally is when the mind is happy, because there's a natural relationship between virtue and happy feelings and non-virtue and unhappy feelings. But the trouble is when attachment kicks in, it's very tricky because it does trigger. It is the catalyst for those pleasant feelings. But we do the wrong analysis. This is the trouble, you know. It's quite subtle, this stuff. We have to study this quite clearly, quite carefully to really understand it properly, you know. Because it's a very precise model, a very precise presentation. So this is why the very first level of practice is Buddha at least exhorting us not to do harmful, not to harm others. Because analyze this. If you've got strong, you know, attachment to killing, you come into this life, that's the karmic explanation. You come into this life, hang on. This is really showing why the very first level of practice is at least stop harming others, you know. So we can see in this life, some people, since they're tiny, they steal. Mummy didn't teach them. Some people cause suffering. Some people love to go fishing since they're tiny. No one taught them. That's their karmic imprint. Now, this is the tragedy, because when we do actions that harm others, why do you think we do them? Because we've got the habit to do it, and we're attached to doing it, and we think by doing it, it'll give us pleasant feelings. That's why we harm others. That's why people steal, lie, jump on, you know, 14 girls every day, whatever, because it's driven by attachment and the past habit, karma and delusions, the two main causes. So at least you try to control the body and speech and don't do the negative actions, because you're going to suffer terribly in the future. Now we can get to the delusions themselves, which drive those actions. And that's the hard part, becoming our own therapist, you know. So that's why, you know, the Buddha's first 7 actions in his little list of 10 don'ts are all about harming others. He doesn't say don't eat 4 pieces of cake. He doesn't say, you know, don't read pornographic books. I'm sure they had them back then in India. Because there's no sentient being involved, there's just yourself. This is because the heaviest actions are those that harm others. They all harm us, but the ones that are heaviest are also the ones that harm others, which are why the future suffering comes when we get harmed by others. So, but we get the learning that we're trying to harness the body and speech, which are the servants of attachment, the servants of anger in junior school. Now here, we're trying to get to the mind itself. And this is where it's so tragic. So, you know, for example, I always use that example of this mother who came to me years ago in Copan. Her boy had died. I always tell this story. Her boy had died 5 years before. He'd been a scuba diver all his life. He was 29 and he's drowned. So she was shocked to hear about karma. You know, he died young. So he'd been a fisherman all his life. So the logic, this is the tragedy of the way karma is. And this is why it's so important to go junior school first. It's not enough to just go meditate. You've got to control your body and speech first and live in vows and do purification every day. This is showing the reasoning for it. So there's this boy. He's got, you know, 4 ways karma ripens. The first one, he gets a human body. That's from other past lives of non-killing. He gets a human life. Fantastic. First way karma ripens. Second, he's born with a bunch of tendencies. We've all got mental tendencies, and they're all from his own past habits. Well, he's a very nice boy. She said he was kind and generous and loving and compassionate, but he also, it was obvious, he had a tendency to kill. As soon as he met fishing at the age of 3 or 5 or something, he fell in love with fishing. She didn't teach him to fish. He had a karmic tendency to fish. Why? Because he hadn't lived in vows of not killing in the past life, and he hadn't purified by vowing, you know, by regretting it and purifying, having compassion and purifying and vowing not to do it again. So he gets a human body again, and then he's got the residual result left over from unpurified killing, and he keeps on killing, and he spent his life killing, and then he died scuba diving. Because what happened is this: when he's born, the second he comes out of the womb, his karma was all programmed before he even gets born in his past life. It's all before, at the time of his death, all these karmic tendencies are programmed. He comes into this life, lovely mummy in Northern California, nice mummy, nice conditions, good environmental karma, good experiences similar to the cause karma, good tendencies, a really good life, a lovely human being. But he's got a tendency to kill. He meets fishing for the first time. And instantly, the karmic, it's like memory. It's like memory is triggered because the karmic seed is there from the habit before. And as soon as he sees the condition called fishing, it triggers that memory. It triggers the karmic seed. And then and this is the point now about feeling. That instant, very, very, very pleasant feelings were triggered because he'd had familiarity with killing in the past. So instantly, intense good feelings are triggered. And the next millisecond, attachment kicks in and then paints a divine picture of this event called fishing. So then he's already locked into, now he's a fisherman. The karmic seed from the past, because he hasn't purified it. He meets the condition called fishing. Very powerful, pleasant feelings are triggered. Now think of this. All we want is pleasant feelings. He didn't even expect fishing to come along. He had no idea. He has no memory of a past life. All he knows is it looks intensely familiar. Very pleasant feelings are triggered. Attachment kicks in and makes it look divine, and it's set in stone. Wow, fishing is amazing. I must keep going fishing. I found the purpose of my life. That's the tragedy. Because we don't question this deep process. That's how we're programmed. Whether it's cake we like, fishing, killing, torturing, raping, being a pedophile, making money, whatever it is, that's the tragedy. Because your pleasant feeling comes in from past attachment, from past connection with it, and then attachment takes over and makes it look delicious. So all those years he went fishing. He's a kind man. His mother never liked going fishing with him. She didn't like fishing, but she didn't want to criticize him. But she went fishing with him one time. And this is the point. Because he had attachment in his mind, He had past habit to fish. It triggered pleasant feelings through that habit, and attachment made it look delicious. It kind of paints a picture and makes fishing look divine. That memory's in his mind all the time. He thinks about fishing all the time. He defines himself as a fisherman. Everything he does in his life is in terms of being able to go fishing and doing all the killing of the fish. He catches all these fish. He's not a monster. He's a nice guy. He sees those fish in his boat every single day, dying an agonizing death, and he doesn't see it. He is blind as a bat. He cannot see anything except through the lenses of his own needs, which is attachment. So attachment makes it look delicious. So he can't see the truth for the fish. He can't see the suffering, never once. That's how ignorant we are. That's how we're driven by attachment. That's how we make up stories and we do not see each other or reality at all. We're living in our own lies, you know. That's the tragedy. He'd been in the lower realms in the past. He'd completed the main karma, stopped the lower realms. Like a miracle, a virtuous karmic seed of a human body rose again. He got a human life, but he hadn't purified killing by living in vows, by vowing not to do it again, and by purifying it. So the difference is always the other story I tell about a little boy who was crying with compassion for the lice in his own house, and he's never killed a living being because he must have vowed never to kill again, lived in vows, and he purified killing. So woke up in this life and never had the thought to kill once, and even had compassion for the lice in his own head at the age of 3. The difference is junior school, living in vows and purification. So we can't get ahead without that. You can meditate till the cows come home. You can get Mahamudra, I don't care. You can watch your mind and get joy. I don't care. If you don't live in vows, if you don't purify your mind, you've got no structure. You've got no foundation. It'll just collapse, you know. Being good is not enough, Lama Tsongkhapa says. We'll get back to junior school again. Just trying to show the necessity for junior school. Living in vows and purification. Psychological. It's not meant to make it, you know, I'm always sounding so intense. It's not meant to make it sound like a policeman. It's just logic. It's sort of like, it's a bit like, you know, you've suddenly discovered you've been eating wrong food for the last 40 years, and now you start eating good food. But it's not enough, is it? You've got to purify all the 40 years of garbage food first. It's not enough just to put good food on top of the bad, the ill health. It's not enough. It's not enough just that you see a garden full of weeds and just start trying to squeeze the flowers in between the weeds. It just doesn't work. It's not meant to be punitive or moralistic. It's just practical psychology, you know. All coming from this self-respect that I am sick of suffering. This whole first scope of practice that we're discussing here has got zero to do with compassion yet. This is compassion for ourselves. It's how to learn how to navigate our own lives so we can get happiness. This is not about compassion yet. This is how to get happiness, Alona. It's hard work, that's all. And the motivation, even the word renunciation sounds so heavy to us. But it's just the way we interpret, because it's religion, you see. We interpret religion in a very heavy way. It's kindness to ourselves. This is kindness to ourselves. It's like going to studying nutrition. It's studying intense nutrition so you can learn to know what to eat and what not to eat, and then you can turn yourself into this marvelous, healthy, happy person. It's mental nutrition, that's all. That's all it is, you know. So essentially, we're moving towards Buddha's, this is the first stages of Buddha's method for how to get happy. That's all. How to get happy feelings all the time. Because, you know, like I said, when you read in the advanced literature like Mahamudra, you read the literature, it's inspiring to do this because it's telling us that our mind is naturally pure, that these delusions are not, they're adventitious, they're not at the core of our being, they can be removed. That's what gives us the encouragement to want to think this way, because we know this is just adventitious rubbish. We're just understanding things wrongly. We've been unkind to ourselves. So the essence of it is this. Buddha's telling us, hey guys, I found a method of how to have happy feelings all the time. I'm not joking, okay? This is what he's saying, that the mind, Buddha's found from his own experience that the mind that's unencumbered by all the delusions and all the non-virtues and all the karmic seeds, that's the mind that's blissfully happy, just naturally. It's just the happiness, joy are the natural state of our mind. So basically what he's saying is this. Sorry, people, you think happy feelings is what you get when you get what attachment wants. He's saying you're not totally wrong, but honey, don't you notice it doesn't last? Whereas I have found that there is a method to have happiness all the time. And that sounds weird to us in our culture. You sound like you're a bit weird if you have happiness all the time. It means a joyful, clear mind. He's saying you think happy feelings are what you get when you get what attachment wants. Yep, you're right, but they don't last. I've found a method where it lasts. So the way to get happiness, he says, what happiness is, you think happiness is what you get when you get what attachment wants. No, happiness is what you get when you give up attachment. That's it. You think happiness is what you get when you get what attachment wants. No, happiness is what you get when you give up attachment, and therefore anger, jealousy, blah, 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 blah. That's it. It's not complicated. The concept isn't complicated. It's just hard work, that's all. And to navigate all this kind of Indian, Tibetan, 3,000-year-old words is quite difficult for us. So the fact that it's possible should give us courage, you know. And this is a tragedy when we start to work on our minds. We tend to think the anger, the attachment, the low self-esteem, the jealousy, the depression, these are who I really am. This is me, we think. And this is our biggest tragedy. We should be in tears of compassion for ourselves. But that's the irony and the tragedy of ego. It clings to things as solid. That's the sad thing, you know. So when we know, just from reading and thinking about it, that these delusions, which are very really there, aren't intrinsic to me, are not at the core of my being. This is very, very encouraging. And then we can practice being our own therapist every day and start to hear the virtues as well and identify with them. The love and the patience and kindness and generosity and self-respect and self-confidence, they are who I really am. Love and compassion, they are who I really am. It's very encouraging. They're the flowers. The delusions are the weeds. So it's all to do with this whole first section, junior school and high school, is all about ourself, got nothing to do with compassion yet. We haven't even go anywhere near compassion yet. This is compassion for ourselves. This is the methods to develop our own selves. We find it hard to hear that. We keep thinking that sounds selfish. No, it's called intelligence. How on earth, in the name of God, can you help other people with nutrition if you haven't studied nutrition and your own nutrition? You can't just... You can't help others. It's not possible until you understand it deeply for yourself. So abiding by the laws of karma, why? Because it stops you from suffering. Knowing about your own delusions and seeing your own attachment and anger and jealousy and pride and low self-esteem and giving it up, why? Because it causes you suffering, sweetheart. If we just could understand this, the suffering we have is caused by these things. It brings so much self-respect if we can think this. It brings courage and confidence, self-confidence. It lessens blame, it lessens anger, it lessens, you know, low self-esteem, it lessens ego. It's powerful. What time is it? 22. Any questions, folks? No? Any
questions? You can just raise your hand. I could see you. Or just unmute yourself. Venerable Robina, there's no question.
I have one.
Oh, okay, please unmute. You're already unmuted.
Amanda, I'm unmuted.
Okay, good. Go ahead, please.
What have we got? Questions?
Hi, Venerable Robina. It's Amanda here. We usually see each other in Liverpool.
Oh, good, darling. Good,
beautiful. Joy.
Good, fantastic. Talk to me.
I took refuge with you, Venerable.
Oh, good. I'm so pleased to see you again. Good. Talk to me, darling.
So, when do we know that the purification practice has worked? What are the signs?
Yeah. It's a process, Amanda. It's not just overnight. It's really a process. It's a gradual chipping away one day at a time. The more sincere we are, the more we chip away, the more we regret, the more we have compassion, the more we vow not to do again. It's a gradual process of, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, molding our mind into this shape of a new person. You're developing new habits. It's not magical overnight. Sometimes it can be quite strong. An extra big chip can fall away, but finally it's this gradual process. And eventually when you realize emptiness, that's when you purify. That's when it stops. So until we've purified, until we've realized emptiness, there's going to be the tendencies there. So this purification practice is sort of like putting atomic bombs under the tendencies so that the virtuous tendencies have the chance to grow. But it's finally when we realize emptiness that we cut the root. So it's an ongoing, incremental, day-by-day practice, Amanda. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as Lama Yeshe says, is the power. What purification is just the strength of your own mind involved in these 4 actions. The power of your regret and the sincerity, the power of your reliance and your compassion, the power of the remedy and the power of the resolve to change. It's like you're practicing piano every day. You keep getting better at it. That's all it really is, darling. Do you understand?
I tend to do them in 2 ways, like quickly, daily, as and when, but also as a practice.
That's good. That's perfect. That's the perfect way to do it, darling. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. In other words, if the moment to grab yourself and you see that something, then the quicker you catch it, the more likely it is not to grow. It's perfect. It's exactly. And that's where, as we get better and better and better, Amanda, it's like learning to drive a car. In the beginning, you don't know what you're doing, but as you're doing it more and more, and as even as you're driving on the motorway, you're automatically adjusting yourself every second because you learn it so well. It's the same here. In the beginning, it's a bit clumsy catching ourselves during the day, but as we keep doing this just becomes our practice. It just becomes natural. It becomes integrated into how you are every day because you're watching your mind like a hawk. You're watching your body like a hawk. You're watching your speech. That's just how it becomes integrated. That's exactly the way it should be, Amanda. Perfect. And then you can have a bit deeper practice at the end of the day or whatever, Do you understand? Yeah. All these things. Anyway, keep moving, everybody. Keep moving, never give up. And delight in our progress. Delight in your progress, Amanda. Delight, all of us, delight in our progress. And have compassion for ourselves. The Lamas don't say it that way, but that's what these teachings are for that. These teachings are about how to be happy. Us to be happy. That's the point. Jangshub Semchog Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Guchig, Ke Panyampa, Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du Paba Shog, Ke Wa Di Nudo Dag Lama Sangi Drugyone, Drawa Chikyang Malupa De Sala Gurpa Shog. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Talia.
Venerable, we would like to offer a long life prayer before we go.
No, another day. Don't worry about it. May we all live long. Thank you. You're so kind. I've already received it. Thank you very much. I'll do my best to kick death in the teeth, okay? Just imagine may we all live long, all right? Me and everybody else live long. That's our long life prayers. Okay, Nina?
Of course, Venerable.
In one thought, right there. May we all live long so we can be of benefit to this crazy world. The world needs us badly. Thank you, precious girl. Thank you, everybody. Much love to you all. Bye.